So I started researching Chernobyl just because I was generally interested in it. And after a couple of weeks of just falling in love with these stories that were so heartbreaking and so shocking, I went to Carolyn Strauss, who is an executive producer of Chernobyl, along with myself and Jane Featherstone. And she and I went to HBO. And we said, here's what we want to do. And HBO said, okay, let's see if you can do it. So what then happens is you do a lot of writing. You do a lot of research and a lot of writing, and you try and get to a place where eventually you get networks like HBO and Sky willing to say, we will put together the very considerable amount of funds required to make the show. But essentially it started because I was fascinated with a simple question. Why did Chernobyl happen? And the truth of that is, in my mind, more shocking than the actual explosion itself. So how do you research something like Chernobyl? You start with pretty simple resources. I think everything can start with an encyclopedia of your choice, and then news articles that you find. And then you start to move into books that are summaries. But eventually what you find is that's not enough. In the case of Chernobyl, there was a real challenge. There was two challenges, really, major challenges. One was that it's a story that comes out of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union, as we know, was not necessarily forthcoming with a lot of facts and information. This was not a society that featured a free flow of information or ideas. The other issue was that because of that restriction, there were a number of accounts that did come out that didn't always agree. So part of the challenge was figuring out which of these accounts felt the most accurate. By and large, I tended to default to accounts that were less dramatic. You'd think that maybe I would want to go for the more dramatic ones, but my instinct was, in telling a story like Chernobyl, you never want to feel like you're helping the drama. The drama is dramatic enough. The tragedy is tragic enough. But beyond that, I had the benefit of an incredible book written by a woman named Svetlana Alexievich, who's a Nobel Prize-winning author, called Voices from Chernobyl, and it is a collection of first-person accounts. And I thought that was remarkable, and in many ways just as important, if not more so, than the various governmental reports and books and news articles that laid out the events of Chernobyl and the causes and the science. Her book really explained the human cost and the human aspect to this, which is what I was fascinated by. So the combination of those things created an enormous bulk of research that took years to put together, as well as turn into a show. We did speak to people who were there as liquidators, and of course we did have a lot of first-person accounts. There were some people that we wanted to speak to, but they've kind of moved on. And part of doing a show like this is to respect the privacy of people who were there, who maybe have said all that they want to say. And that's a hard one, I think. Sometimes people think, well, you owe us something more. But my feeling is you don't. Those people owe us nothing. We owe them, as far as I'm concerned. So we approached all of this with as much humility and sensitivity as we could. But we did have, happily, the benefit of a very substantial amount of first-person accounts. And we also spoke a lot with people who just generally had grown up in that time in the Soviet Union, in Ukraine, in Belarus, and just spoke to them about how their lives functioned on a day-to-day basis. I had them, a number of people, read through the scripts to say, does this feel culturally accurate? Have I made mistakes? What would you suggest would be more true to your experience? So we tried to take all that into account, and I think we were fairly successful. It's probably a better story to tell you that it developed over time in this wonderful process, but the truth is, I had a point of view of how I wanted to do it, and that's how I did it. I always felt that the story needed to be told in a certain way, and that way was respectful of the audience, respectful enough to say, you all know that this thing blew up. I'm not going to make you wait 5 episodes for anything to blow up, nor am I going to even make you 1 episode for something to blow up. It's not about the explosion. I want to show you what it's really about. And I want to tell the story through the lens of people. And these are the 3 people I want to do it with. And that's how I'm going to go. Now, in between all of that, a million changes occur and things develop and emerge. But the basic point of view of how I wanted to tell the story was there with me from the start. What do I want people to take away from Chernobyl? What I want them to take away more than anything is that if you lie, if you are part of a system of lying, if you are someone who agrees with lies that are given to you by your government, by your leaders, by your churches, by your friends, by Facebook, there is a cost attached to this. The truth is always there. Right now, we live in a time where there is essentially a global assault on the truth. And we comfort ourselves with stories because they're comforting. It's hard to say that, for instance, the climate is changing and threatening our existence. It's much easier to say, or is it? It doesn't seem like that way today. Well, you can do that for a while, but eventually the truth catches up. Eventually it does. We cannot hide from it. And Chernobyl to me is a story about what happens when people put lies above the truth. The truth does not care, and it will get you. So I hope that when people are done watching Chernobyl, they have a new understanding of how all of our governments function in a way that is not so foreign and different from the Soviet Union, which we once thought of as uniquely poor in its relationship to the truth. I think now we're starting to see we all have trouble with it. And that, to me, is the lesson of Chernobyl.